I'm on day 119 of retention, and a lot has changed. I think so much has changed that it's actually really hard for me to explain my thoughts about it. And I'm going to get into that in this video, and I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about the new things that kind of come up as a result of doing a long streak of almost 4 months at this point. What's really happening inside my heart and in my mind. I've noticed that over the course of the first 2 months, I really started to get to this point of integration. I was like still the man that I used to be, addicted to pornography, addicted to masturbation, addicted to all the emotional regulation that gave me, but not fully formed in the integrated identity that I was building as a result of doing retention. The regulated part of myself that I was building wasn't fully present. My regulation wasn't in full steam. I was just starting to molt, if you will. And I think the next 2 months, so post day 60, was an integration step. So the first 2 months were just getting clean. And then it was just the next 2 months were just still hard at times, but becoming more and more the guy that is doing retention, becoming more and more like the identity that I was searching for. And what's recently been going on with me is I felt more and more present as time has gone on. Some days are a little bit harder than other days, and some days, I sleep a little bit. I, sleep a lot. Like some days my sleep fluctuates, and some days, my training fluctuates. The weather outside is fluctuating big time where I live, and that's hindering my ability to get sunlight and go out and experience the world as I normally would, right? Or as I was in the beginning of this streak. And so what I basically realized from my entire time on retention is just I am really just now living a life that is separate from pornography. And the man that I'm becoming as a result of doing retention has really shaped my life. I do a lot of things differently now. I do a lot of things for different reasons now. I am very conscious of my reasons why I'm engaging in certain activities. I'm very conscious of my ability to be present. I'm very conscious of my ability and my day-to-day activity and how that contributes to my overall experience in life. And I'm also very upset at times with what that means for me. That does mean, a lot of effort is to be given, right? When you put yourself in such a high state, you then also have to keep yourself there, and that requires a bit of focus. But I guess my worry and my distraught over this sort of thought process is not, it's kind of in vain. I've had to work through some worry and some rough mental patches recently because I went on the carnivore diet, and it messed with my mental capacity. It messed with my mental state. And that's mainly just due to the fact that I was not used to that, and I had fluctuations in electrolytes and couldn't hold any water in my body. But now that I'm back and I'm normal from all that, it seems like that did do a hindrance on my overall progress. But I've noticed that urges at this stage are very intense, and the peace that you get from being separate from urges is also very intense. So I guess life, the further you go, paints a really, really good picture right in front of your eyes of what it's going to be like if you choose to go back to your old ways, how it's going to feel, and what that entails. And it tells you very directly when you're on that path. And then I don't think it tells you as directly when you're off the path, but it definitely tells you exactly the opposite of what you feel when you're on the path. Or, yeah, the exact opposite. And so, it's interesting because my whole goal day to day now is just to be as mentally celibate and abstaining from lust in every mental way. I've separated myself entirely from the dating apps, from uh, social media, from pretty much any stimulation from women that's digital, because I've noticed that the difference between digital stimulation versus just like seeing a pretty woman in real life is completely different. Because the actions that my mind wants to take as a result of seeing a pretty woman in real life is completely different than the ones that you see digitally. And I've noticed that the world itself is set up for us to fail as men. It's set up for men to fail in a very, very drastic way. Not because we are admitted to fail, not because like if we do fail it's bad, but really just because like I'm not trying to say that the world itself is bad. Okay, I'm not trying to say that we aren't able to overcome it. But I am saying that we are at a disadvantage when it comes to really making some progress in this life, really making some genuine spiritual progress. And it's due to everything. But the way women, and this is not all women, I know that there's good women out there. I've seen those good women. Trust me, I've met women that are good women. They know what is right and what is wrong, how their image and their body impacts the world around them. I've met girls like that. But we have been tricked to think that you can just throw around your sexuality. And it's been done primarily to force us farther and farther away from spiritual wholeness. And I think we only get there through engaging with the spirit, but we somehow only seem to get so far without retention. We can't get far if we aren't celibate, or if we aren't aiming for a higher celibate nature. And I guess another question that I would propose to myself often throughout this journey is, what's the purpose? Like, you say that you're battling this sort of pressure, right? You say that you're battling this sort of darkness. And yes, there does come an element of like addiction and how it weighs on your nervous system. But you also have logic to outweigh it. In fact, the only way you're going to outweigh it is logic. The only reason you are actively abstaining against the confines of pornography and what it does to your mind is because your mind has come up with a logical understanding that this is not good, and you've come up with that understanding due to the bad feeling that you get as a result of releasing, the ways in which your life is not going how you want it to go, maybe bad relationships with women, maybe the knowledge that it's affecting other areas of your life, like your marriage or your sex life, right? And so there's so many different things that are associated with doing this. And I guess the biggest question, like I said, is what's really the purpose? What purpose does going back on your word serve you? What purpose does making time for the immorality of the work that you've done, or the immorality of broken sexual nature, to come back and haunt you? If there is no purpose in us actually giving any energy to sexual immorality, then why do we still hang on to it? Why do we still entertain it? And the reason is because when we have an associated feeling, right? When we have a feeling, right? We see someone, we see a pretty woman, or we see something online, or we see something on the television, and it gives us a feeling, and we have an associated response. We've never trained a response other than release. We've never trained a response other than, pick up your phone and look at bad sites. We've never trained ourselves outside of these confines. And if you can, think back to when you started engaging with this stuff. You weren't training yourself, but you kind of were. Like, you weren't training yourself, like you weren't engaging with porn, or engaging with masturbation, or engaging with sex addiction directly. You weren't doing that intentionally. You were doing that as a result of feeling a certain way. Every single time that you were in that sort of situation, right, you were feeling a certain way. And that feeling was really the trigger. It wasn't that there was something else at work. It was the feeling. Because that's what we must get to at a certain point, is that retention isn't just about abstaining from urges. It's about understanding why they're popping up. And I guess not really understanding just why, but understanding why we respond the way we do when an urge pops up. Why do we have to smack our hands away from touching ourselves? Why do we have to walk outside in the sunlight when we feel an urge coming on? Why do we have to go and work out? And this is going to lead you to a lot of really complex thought processes, but also very interesting answers. But when we want to get down to the root cause of the urge in the present moment, of why is this urge affecting me right now? And then feel that reason, and then ask yourself, is this how it always is? Does this urge always come up because I'm lonely? Does it always come up because I feel broken? Does it always come up because I feel lost? And where does that sit? Does it sit in my brain, or does it sit in my heart? And you're probably thinking, well, it probably sits in my heart. It's a foundational issue, right? A foundational issue that needs change. I think after getting to 4 months of retention, I'm starting to understand that the foundational issues, like, you may be able to change a lot about your brain and the way you think, regarding the reaction to urges, right? If you're practicing retention for a long period of time, you retrain the urge, right? So when the urge comes up, you used to react in, okay, let's go release. But now when the urge comes up, you react in, okay, let's continue through this and retain, right? That's just a different input. And you're training your brain to hit that wall first because it's most recent. Most recency overrides, most recency and most drilled overrides any other pathway. And that's not to say that if you were to practice for a long time, you just can't relapse. No, you will have the opportunity to relapse numerous amounts of times. But the reality is, when you're in the retention journey, you retrain the urge to just no longer affect you in a fundamental way. This is causing me to do a different action. And then what does the guy who does that, what does he look like? What is he actually doing? And you start to conform into that kind of person, that kind of image. Like I said, after doing 4 months, I think what I've noticed more so now is, because I've come to reality a little bit more, my brain is starting to heal at a foundational level, because I've been several very, very long extended periods of time within this streak of just zero sexual stimulation. Not to say that I'm like edging every day, but to say that, like, I've gone on dates with girls, or I've hung out with girls, and various different things I haven't released, but I will say that, throughout this time period, even just like thinking and fantasizing about when we can be sexual stimulation, but when you go on retention, you are able to distance yourself so incredibly intensely from that. And obviously you're more sensitized, so like fantasizing about a woman is going to be far less stimulating than actually masturbating or watching pornography or having sex, right? So even though there is sexual stimulation that can happen at the mind, it's not something that drains us of our energy as much as other things. So when we get to a certain period of time, we've actually begun to measure ourselves when our nervous system has spent several months of time away from that stimulation. And in that time, what do you think it's doing? Do you think that your nervous system is doing anything but healing? Like, realistically, the only thing that your nervous system is doing is recalibrating so that you can become more and more like the decisions and actions you're making on a day-to-day basis. You're becoming more and more the guy that would make the decisions that you're making. I want to be honest, I don't really know exactly what is going to change this. The only thing that I've found that is as helpful as doing long-term retention, not as helpful, but the only thing that I found that really boosts the benefits or really gets you to a place you want to be in more is meditation and sleep. Meditation and prayer, specifically. Prayer and meditation. So prayer and meditation and sleep. Good sleep is by far the most important thing in your life on retention. It will drive you to do incredibly beautiful things in your life. It sets you up for having good days or bad days. It sets you up for literally any possible scenario. But when you get good sleep, you are always going to be on. And when you get good sleep plus a long-term retention streak, there's nothing better than that. So after 4 months, I've noticed that I'm moving my mental capacity from just what do I want to happen and where do I need to go. right? I don't necessarily need to be anywhere, but where is my heart pulling me? I'm much, much, much more intuitive um, now than I ever have been in my entire life. I'm much more in tune with my intuition and with my overall wants and desires. And I'm much more in tune with asking myself real questions. I used to go about life just having feelings and emotions and thoughts rattle around just like everybody else does. But I was never able to fully step back at the ones that I didn't want to engage with and ask myself why they were there. When I started to be able to do that, I leveled up way faster than I ever thought I could in various different ways. Just because when I was able to ask those questions, it brought me out of action and into process, right? When I am a very processed individual, like process order, like thing happens, there's an associated process. And in that process, there's always an associated reasoning, a thinking about what you're doing, thinking about your actions and your response. Usually, I would just be on autopilot. Thoughts, emotions, feelings come up in my day to day, and I just have a reaction. There is no consideration. There is no deeper thought process to what's actually going on. There is no regulation aspect to where I will realize why I feel a certain way and then go and take an action to make myself feel better rather than acting immediately with an emotional response, and then that dysregulates my ability to do something about my actual reasoning. So if I were to have a bad, let's say I have like something where I mess up in my work, you know, and I get angry about that immediately as a reaction, when I go back to reason with myself, it's going to be harder to see through that and see through it logically because my anger has now overridden my emotional capacity. And, all this stuff is very deep and subtle, but it's more regulating than you can ever imagine. It's more important than you can ever imagine when you take this stuff seriously. Like when you genuinely consider that your life is in your hands and that you really are able to do something about your day-to-day experience, it becomes so freeing to think that thoughts, feelings, and emotions that you perceive as negative or that you do not want don't need to be there. And there is a process associated with dealing with them, and we can understand why they pop up. And when we do that, it actually increases our ability to understand why we are human and who we actually are. Now I understand my tendencies. Now I understand other people's tendencies. Now I understand how I deal with things. And then maybe when someone's coming at me with a certain emotion, I can be more regulated to understand how to help them or how to engage with them. And really, I'm being more charitable and more gracious as a human being by doing that. Keeping myself more regulated, keeping myself more in check. I'm actually doing something for everybody else because I'm able to be more present for them. I'm able to be more present as a result of being around somebody, right? And that's beautiful because that's a connection, integration, and a relationship with others. That's all being built through all being built through emotional regulation, like genuine, honest regulation, and loving it too. I know it can be hard on retention to do these things. I know it can be hard to do them day in and day out. Here's the reality. On retention, you are going to be forced to level up, whether you like it or not. You're going to have these realizations that I'm having, whether you like it or not. They may not be exact 100% the way you're going to experience them, but they're going to be pretty similar. The sooner that you start loving, and I found this to be 100% true, the sooner that you start loving the process and stop worrying about what is to come, or curious, not curious, you can be curious, but don't let the feelings, thoughts, and emotions of the changing world around you deter you from truly leveling up while on retention. You want this process to happen naturally. And like I said, it's going to happen whether you like it or not, but it's going to be painful if you don't understand how to properly deal with it. Or if you just don't understand it, maybe you get confused and worried, and then you relapse as a result of being worried. And I'll tell you right now, that's probably more shame than you could ever get from lack of self-control. Because then you don't feel incapable, you just feel like an idiot. And that's really bad. It's hard on retention to do all these things. Know that the more that you fight yourself, the less that you actually get out of your moment-to-moment experience. The more that you worry while on retention, the less that you actually get to get through that worry. The more that worry will come up. It's not for you. In fact, I've understood now that worry is a sheet. It's like a cloth. It actually doesn't hold any weight. It's just wrapped around your eyes so you can't see the reality that's around you. It has zero significance. Like, zero. On retention, everything gets taken care of when you are worry-free, when you are not placing your trust in your hope, in your attention, your energy. See, trust and hope and peace and all this stuff, your heart, that's what we're talking about here. That's wrapped up in energy, okay? The talk of energy, the associative projection of energy. When you use that on worry, you lose everything. You lose the ability to reason. You lose the ability to be in control. You don't lose the benefits of retention, which means that you can be very non-interacting with your spirit on retention, but still experience benefits. Right? So you don't lose the retention benefits because a lot of this stuff is physical. It's happening in the physical realm, not just always spiritual. But then it requires you, and I mean this sincerely, requires you to engage in the spiritual to overcome. Okay? And then once you do that, something beautiful really does happen, and that's the freeing feeling. That's where meditation really comes into play in this entire experience. That's why people say that meditation is supreme and probably the most important pillar of semen retention, because it's a spiritual experience, because everything that's happening to you happens at the state of spiritual. So don't fear it. Don't fear and get wrapped up in the changing lifestyle. Don't think that because you are getting attention from women, therefore you have to interact with them. You do realize that that's what got you here in the first place. Not interacting with women, of course, but the feeling like you need to. The feeling like you need to go and do something as a result of feeling attraction. You don't have to do anything. If you don't want that, if you don't need that life, what purpose does it have, right? Ask yourself this question over and over and over again, because it's going to come up so many times where you're going to be tested and you're not going to have an answer, and as a result, you're going to have a reaction. You only begin to have an answer when you step back and observe, okay? And in observance, we find truth and meaning and understanding. That's what we want. We want the understanding, okay? Don't react. Ask yourself questions. And when you get up to 4 months, it's not like I'm doing anything better than you're doing. I feel like I'm still at square one with a lot of this stuff, not in the capacity that I haven't gotten and progressed in all these things, but rather that my mental state is still challenged on a foundational level the same way it used to be, but I'm just better about dealing with it now, which makes me feel like I am more capable, okay? Not necessarily that I am more capable, but it makes me feel that way. And as a result, I am more capable. You see what I'm saying? The feeling is associated with the reality, okay? Same way as when we have these feelings, these urges, right, in the beginning, the reality is that we have a certain reaction to that. I have a certain reaction to staying away from urges, and that is being happy and enjoying my life as a result of that. You got to understand that the man you become as a result of decisions you make change your environment. But all this happens at the foundational level of feelings, because how we feel about it is really what's going to happen, okay? And then realize this. Retention itself is a practice for a particular reason. You may not fully understand the fact that abstaining from pornography and abstaining from ejaculation does actually do something foundationally important for your life and for your spirit, or you may not understand how big of a change it might be for you. That's okay. Realize it's a practice, okay? As time goes on, even after 30 days, there's guys who are like, holy crap, this is insane, right? So if you give it a real try, and this is a real try, 30 to 60 days, that's a real try. If you give retention a real try, you will not be able to not see the benefits, okay? There's something beautiful in this process. I appreciate y'all for watching and understanding this beauty and participating in it as well, because you are doing something that is so essential for the entire world. Remember when I was talking about being a more regulated human being makes it better for everyone else around you? There's so many more ways I can go into that conversation and into that discussion to explain to you how much of a service you're doing to the people around you and the world, that it would just take too long. You're doing an incredible job while doing this practice. If you're not doing this practice, realize the beauty that you could be contributing to. Regardless, I appreciate y'all for watching. If you like this kind of content and you want to see more from this, go to my channel, subscribe, and then look at my other videos, because I have stuff talking about specific topics and more motivational videos that you may need. If you like this video, like it, and if you have any questions, put them down in the comments. I respond to all these questions that are asked to me through my comments. I look at all the comments, so I will see your question and you will get a response from me. So thank you for watching once again, and stay retained.